Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Chelsea if you are new here. If you are not new, welcome back. This is a little something that I call crime and wine. So grab your favorite snack, grab a wine or a White Claw, be quiet, I know it's not wine, and let's go ahead and talk about true crime. So I did 2 videos like this already. Not like this technically, I was doing my makeup, but then in both those videos, it took too long and then my makeup looked shitty and I just was not happy with it. So I decided that I'm gonna do a crime and wine version of it instead, where I drink with you and have a snack, and it's more of us hanging out and me retelling you a story, just like I would if I was to corner you at a social event instead of me doing my makeup. Because listen, I did this within 15 minutes. So today we're going to be talking about Linda Hazzard. I would call her Dr. Linda Hazzard, but she's not a doctor. We'll get into that in a second. So picture this. We're in the US. It's the turn of the century, the early 1900s, and rich people are just loving sanitariums and using alternative medicine. For instance, at Battle Creek Sanitarium, that's where they first used cereal as medicinal food, which actually that's how Kellogg's and cereal in general was invented, I guess. Apparently they were trying to make people stop masturbating. Real weird, I don't know. Back then, there weren't certain laws in place to protect people from being sold certain things under, the false pretenses of, if you drink this White Claw, it's gonna cure your cancer or something like that, right? So people could just make these crazy claims. All right, so now that I've set the stage for you, Linda was born in 1867 in Carver County, Minnesota. By the time she was 18, she was married and had 2 kids. So a little bit over 10 years later, in 1898, Linda decided that this journey of having a family and having a husband wasn't really for her. So then she was like, deuces, I'm out. I'm gonna go pursue a career in Minneapolis. I am so bad at saying that word. I'm bad at saying that word in Indianapolis. Minneapolis? That's not good. So now we're jumping to 1902. And that's when it's believed that she killed her first patient. And they died of starvation under her care. And coincidentally, that is exactly when her divorce was finalized from her husband. So the coroner who was looking at the body of that patient was like, okay, clearly this was starvation, and he tried to have charges brought against Linda, but she couldn't be held accountable because she wasn't a licensed physician. And then also the family of that patient was like, where are her rings? Where's her wedding ring? Where's her jewelry? And they were asking Linda, and she's like, I don't know. So about 2 years after that, Linda met Samuel Chrisman Hazzard, and he was on a seemingly promising military career. He graduated from West Point, which is a very prestigious, very prestigious school. And he got kicked out of the military, discharged from the military though, because apparently he was doing some embezzling or fraud or basically stealing money, I guess. And then by the time him and Linda got married, he actually wasn't divorced yet from his second wife. He had already been married twice before, and he was only divorced from the first one and not the second one. So when he went to marry Linda, that's illegal. You can't be married to 2 people at once, so that's actually called bigamy. And he was found guilty of that and had to serve 2 years in prison. So then once he got out and was divorced and everything, then he married Linda. And they decided to go to Washington State to start over. Now, in Washington State, there was this weird loophole that seems completely made up in the early 1900s, that if someone was practicing some sort of alternate medicine or holistic medicine, then they would be seen as a doctor, the equivalent of a doctor. The way I made it make sense in my head is that imagine if someone was certified as a life coach, and then because of that loophole, it would be the equivalent of them being able to practice as a psychiatrist. What? It's so crazy. So Linda was a fasting specialist, but because of that law that was grandfathered all these people in, and that little weird loophole, she was able to call herself a doctor and then was able to have a medical license. Basically, the state of Washington done fucked up. In 1908, she self-published a book called Fasting for the Cure of Disease, in which she claimed that fasting could cure all diseases, all illnesses, including cancer. Now, in this book, Linda outlined like a program for fasting, and it consisted of having her patients fast for days and weeks and like legit like months sometimes. Obviously, that's not possible. You will die, but these people, she had a lot of fans, which is crazy to me. So she not only had them fast for those crazy amount of time, she would also have them do enemas for like hours, and then also, which that's like the thing that goes up your butt and it like flushes out your system. And then also she would do like horrible massages on them that apparently were more like beatings. So even though Linda's clearly batshit crazy, her book did attract a lot of people, like a lot of people. And if you think about it, it's kind of the same, no, I don't want to say the same, but it's kind of just like how like intermittent fasting and like keto and like all this stuff, and like how people these days too like claim like, oh, I got rid of my cancer, like this disease I had went away because I started eating this certain way. Obviously this is a little bit different because you're like not eating, but you get it. So one of her first clients after she released the book, her name was Daisy Maud Hagland, I believe, and Linda had her fast for 50 days. We can all guess what happened to her. She died of starvation. And then there was Claire and Dorothea Williamson. So we're just going to call Dorothea Dora because that's the name that she preferred to go by. And they were a very wealthy set of twins from Canada, I believe. Now they saw the advertisement for Linda's sanitarium in a magazine or something wherever they were. Now she didn't call it a sanitarium. It was called the Institute of Natural Therapeutics. Now that sounds pretty fabulous, right? I mean, that sounds like a nice treatment center. It doesn't sound like you're gonna starve to death there. Now in 1911, when Dora and Claire got to Seattle to meet Linda, they, did a consultation with her at her office, and they were meeting with her and they paid for everything, and she's like, you know what? We need to have you start right now. However, the sanitarium's not done being built yet, even though they'd like already paid for it. So what she did is she had them get a apartment in like a very affluent part of town. Affluent means rich, right? Whatever, a very wealthy part of town. And she had them stay there. And that's where she fed them very, very, very small servings, like literally like a cup of either tomato juice. And it wasn't really tomato juice. It was more like tomato broth and asparagus broth, like half a cup twice a day. And then teaspoons, or maybe I think it was tablespoons actually, tablespoons of like fruit juice, like orange juice, and that was only sometimes. And then that's it. Like that's all they ate for like days. And then she, instead of just doing like an hour-long enema, it was like 5+ hour-long enemas. And then again, the massages that she would do to them. And apparently like it was like very, very, very violent. Now you're probably thinking, why would anyone do this? Like why wouldn't people leave? Like why would people stick with the program? Now, it's said that Linda was very manipulative, very persuasive. Those are the same exact thing, Chelsea. And she was just like mesmerizing. Like people would say she could like hypnotize you. And that's why a lot of people think that she was kind of like a cult leader. Now, just 2 months after getting to Seattle and starting their treatments, the twins weighed less than 70 pounds. And apparently that is when they had them like sign everything over to her. And now no one in the Williamson family was checking on them or worried about them or even knew where they were, because the twins didn't tell them any of their family members anything, because they didn't want to have to deal with the judgment that they usually got from their family from trying holistic and alternative treatments. Now, one of the twins sent a letter or a telegram or a raven. They sent something to Australia to their childhood nanny. Some articles I read said it was their nanny. Some said it was their nurse. I think it was their nurse, like someone who took care of them when they were little. And now her name was Margaret Conway. And she said that the letter was like jumbled. It didn't make sense. It only contained like a few words. And so she was like, what the heck is this? This is weird. So she knew something was wrong. She bought a boat ticket like right away. Keep in mind, this is like 1912 or 1911, something like that. And it took her like 2 months to get from Australia to the Pacific Northwest. Now, Sam Hazzard, he's still in the picture. He's still being manipulative and crazy too, just how Linda likes him. He met Margaret at like the train depot or something like that, or at her hotel when she got in town. And that's when he broke the news to her that Claire had already died. And then when Margaret finally got to Linda, Linda told her that she died due to medication that she was given when she was very young that caused her organs to shrink. So basically saying like she was too far gone for us to even help her or for this treatment to even work. Now, Margaret went and saw Claire's body at the funeral home. She was like, this doesn't even, like, this isn't her. This doesn't look like her. Like, the face shape is all wrong. Like, her hair is weird and it just doesn't look like her at all. So then she was like, all right, Claire's already gone. I need to see Dora right now. So she saw Dora and she could not believe it, but she was only 50 pounds and her shoulders were like pointy and protruding almost and almost like popping out of her skin, and Dora couldn't even sit down without being in pain. Now the real messed up thing is, obviously all of this is messed up, but one more messed up part is that Linda and Sam had helped themselves to all of Claire's estate, all of her clothing. Linda was literally like wearing Claire's clothes when she met Margaret, and Claire had signed over her entire estate to them. So they like took all of her jewelry, all of her money basically. And then I'm not really even sure how this would work because the girls are like 30, but Linda was made the guardian like for life of Claire, and Sam Hazzard was made to be her power of attorney. And they basically had like tried to convince Claire and Dora that like Dora was like, insane, that she was crazy, which realistically she probably was a little bit, because when you're starving, like your brain is starving and it shrinks. So Margaret wasn't buying any of this. She was like, this is all crazy, like no. So she tried to take Dora and they wouldn't let her. They're like, you cannot take her. So they were basically holding her hostage, and then Margaret was like, all right, fine, if you're not gonna let me take her. She's like, I'll get another family member here. So Margaret went and found their uncle who lived in Portland, so it like wasn't too far away. So they got into him, and then after he like basically haggled with them over Dora, they were able to settle on what would be the equivalent to, I believe, about I think it was 60, like $60,000 to $80,000 in today's money, just so that they could take Dora off of the property. Now it's said that their uncle and Margaret tried to get all local law enforcement and local officials to press charges against Linda and Sam, but they like would not budge. Like they would not press any charges against them for Claire's death. So then they went up higher. I don't know how to pronounce the name of the person they went to or like their title, but it's basically like a government official. They went to him. He started an investigation, and then he started seeing that Linda was very closely related to, involved with other people who had died and had like everything taken from them. One of which was even a local government official or local legislature, whatever you want to call him. He actually owned the property that the sanitarium was located on, and he had fasted for a certain amount of days, and he died. And right before he died, what did he do? Signed everything over to Linda. Another one was John Flux. He came over to America from England to buy a ranch, but then he fasted for, I believe it was 60 days. He died under Linda's care, obviously. And then his family was told by John's lawyers that he only had $70 to his name when he died. So he was extremely wealthy, so obviously she stole all of his money. One that's very interesting is someone from New Zealand. His name was Eugene Wakeland. He actually had family members that were like dukes or barons, something. They were some type of like royal lineage or something. So he was on her property, on Linda's property, and he was actually shot. So his body was found on the property, and he was found with a gunshot to the head. And Linda was like, I don't know, I guess he shot himself in the head. It was obviously very suspicious, but they just ruled it as a suicide, and again pokes at the theory that she had local government and law enforcement in her pocket, because it's kind of, there's a trail here. What I'm thinking happened with that one specifically is that she wanted money from him, and like she needed it sooner, and like he wasn't like dying fast enough, so I think she just shot him. But she didn't really get any money from him because he wasn't very, very wealthy, but she thought that he was. So there's at least 12 confirmed people, it's actually, I'm pretty sure it's a little bit more than that, who died under her care due to starvation, but apparently it's said that there's a lot more. I personally think there's more, especially because of the fact that Linda would usually alter the like autopsy reports and say that people died from like other things, like everything but starvation, so that it wouldn't be her fault. On August 15th, 1911, Linda was arrested for the first-degree murder of Claire Williamson. Now, there were nurses who worked there that testified that the twins were screaming in pain when they were going through all of these treatments, and basically just how the like living conditions and the treatments and all that just weren't kosher at all, especially when it was made out to be, you know, a very lavish and fancy spa-like treatment center, when it was like a hellhole basically. And a lot of clients there, even 2 or 3 of them, came up to Margaret Conway when she was there trying to get Dora. They would come up to her and be like, please help us, like we are being held here against our will, like we're prisoners, which is crazy. Now, the prosecution also brought forth evidence of financial starvation, is what they called it too. It was basically just evidence of forged checks and fake letters and all this stuff, just showing that she was just stealing everything and draining Claire and Dora's estate, which it was very, very large since their father had passed and left everything to them. Now, Linda refused to take any type of accountability or responsibility for any of the deaths that happened to patients when they were under her care. Obviously, I mean, did we think she was going to? She kept saying that the trial was a personal attack on her because she was a successful female, basically saying, they're just jealous of me, which is hilarious. And I do want to read a quote from her. Death in the fast never results from deprivation of food, but it is the inevitable consequence of vitality sapped to the last degree by organic perfection. I had to read that like 5 times. Because again, she uses this very complex vernacular, and I don't know what the fuck that meant. But then after I read it, I was like, okay, so she is basically saying, if you're fasting to try to cure an illness, but then you die, you're not dying from the fasting, you're dying from the illness that was going to kill you anyways, which is very manipulative and goes against everything that she had already said and wrote a book about, because she was saying that fasting would cure everything. Just the way she wrote things reminds me of when Joey, on the show Friends, when Joey was writing a letter of recommendation for Monica and Chandler for the adoption agency, and he used a thesaurus on every single word, and it made it like make no sense. Now, after the trial, Linda was found guilty of manslaughter, and her fake medical license was revoked, and she was sentenced to 2 to 20 years of hard labor in a prison in Walla Walla, Washington. She only served 2 of those years, and she was actually pardoned by the governor, which makes no sense, proving that she had politicians in her pocket and she was just paying everyone off because she stole all this money from so many people. Now, after Linda was released in December of 1915, her and Samuel were like, let's start over again. So they moved to New Zealand because apparently she had a very big following over there. So they moved there. She worked as a osteopath, is that how you call it? Osteopath, and a dietitian for 5 years. And she wrote another book. She continued to starve a bunch of people. I don't know if she killed anyone there. She most likely did. And then did I say she wrote another book? Whatever, she made a lot of money there. After only 5 years in New Zealand, her and Samuel actually moved back to Washington, to Awala, and they built her dream sanitarium. Now, because she didn't have her fake medical license anymore, it couldn't be called a sanitarium. So she called it a school for health. Now, she opened her school for health in 1920, and it was huge. Like, it was lavish and giant. Apparently, it had over 100 rooms, so she was just starving hundreds and hundreds of people. And it actually had her own autopsy room in the basement. And then in 1935, the building burned to the ground, and she just decided to not rebuild it. And then 2 years later, 2 years or 3 years later, 1938, yeah, so 3 years later, Linda was actually diagnosed with cancer, and she tried to heal herself by fasting, and then she died of starvation, which really is just the kicker for me, because it's like, she was clearly a scammer and was taking advantage of all these people, but then she clearly did believe what she was doing was working because she tried it herself. It's very confusing. Now, there is a very, very, very good book called Starvation Heights that is about all of this, and you should totally read it. It's actually the next book after I'm done reading Where the Crawdads Sing. It's the next one on my list that I have to read, and I'm really excited about it. So y'all should read that one too. Oh my god, we should read it together. Let me know what you think about all of this. Do you think that she, obviously, yes, we know she was like a liar and a scammer and just a horrible person, but do you think she actually did believe like it was working and she was helping people? Or do you think she's just like the other like Dr. Death person, the one in Texas who like was the neurosurgeon? That one's crazy too. He had like a god complex, like clearly you're bad at what you're doing, but yet you're still doing it, but like you believe you're good at it. It's very, very strange to me. So don't forget to like and subscribe and comment and all those things, and share this video. I would love you if you did that. And if you have any suggestions or anything of different stories you would like me to do, definitely comment down below and let your girl know. As always, always be aware of your surroundings. Don't ignore red flags, and I will see you in my next video. Bye. Oh my god, that was so good.